The Breakaways, Part 1, The Drake. Chapter 1. Hellfire spewed out of the dragon's toothy maw, melting the snow, capping the mountain, and barbecuing his crewmates before they even got the chance to scream. Ben recoiled from the heat, fighting against the wind for balance. "Stand tall, you maggots!" Martius roared in his booming voice. The wind pulled at his long, flowing hair, his great battle-axe in hand. The dragon beat its wings and dove toward the ground, right at the group of archers and crossbowmen Martius had placed as bait. "Now!" Martius roared, and the half-dozen of them loosed their projectiles before diving out of the way. The dragon hissed and growled at the barrage and landed with force, loosening rocks and ice from the peaks around them. Two men disappeared under a slide. Another had his head caved in by a chunk of stone. The dragon lunged with its mouth and grabbed a woman from the ground. With a flick of its head, it sent her and her crossbow spinning off the mountain. It swiped its tail and sent another archer flying off the edge as he tried to flee. Ben saw nothing but grit in Martius's eyes as he glared at the dragon. Those eyes shifted to him, boring into his soul, exposing his vulnerabilities, dispelling his confidence. He must see the fear in my eyes. "Go," was all Martius said to him. "Now!" he roared. The others around him ran toward the dragon, shouting with bloodlust, thrusting their spears and swords into the air. Ben didn't move. His legs felt detached. Sparks flashed on the peak above the dragon. The air cracked like a slaver's whip, and a mass of rock shifted, then dropped onto the great creature's tail, back, neck, head, and his crewmates too. "What would you do, Benzan?" Martius asked, his eyes wild. He grabbed Ben's leather jerkin with both hands, lifting him, shaking him. "What would you do?" He shouted it into his face again, shaking him with such force he thought his head might snap off. More than anything in the world, Ben wanted to shout back, to raise his sword and bury it in him, but guilt and fear stole his resolve. He bunched his eyes closed, and when he opened them again, he found a familiar hand grabbing his arm, where Martius had, shaking him. Ben, you all right?" "Dudley, what the fuck are you doing here?" Ben said, sitting up disoriented. "You were shouting and swearing like a mad drunkard." "Swearing? Saying what?" "Like effing get off me, you bastard. You nearly punched me in the face. What were you dreaming about?" Ben cleared the sleep from his eyes and gave them a good rub with his knuckles. "I can't remember." He sighed. Each night, the same dream. The mountain, the dragon, the helplessness of seeing the deaths of those he cared for and feeling responsible. "What is it anyway? Why did you wake me?" Ben asked. "It's Lucas. I think we've got a problem." "I'm going to break that fat nose of his," Ben growled as he stomped through the sleepy town of Pancho's hold. The dawn chorus was in full voice, finches and sparrows swooping from thatch roofs. Dew glistened on the tips of emerging flowers outside the rows of squat stone houses. "Where did you say he was?" "Just off the green, in a house with a red door," Dudley said, hurrying behind. Ben looked at the doors they passed, then at Dudley. "They're all red." Dudley shrugged. They found the green soon enough, a triangular space in the heart of the town, and not very green. Feet had long trampled the grass to mud, and on market days the wheels of wagons laden with goods churned it into a quagmire. Today wasn't a market day, and the green was deserted. "Can you remember where, Dud?" Dudley squinted, looked around him. He changed direction, walked backwards, then forwards, looking around. "Just trying to get the right angles," he muttered, seeing Ben's frown. He pulled on the brown goatee that stretched to his chest, as he often did, then pointed to the right. "Over there." It was their best lead, so Ben followed him, though he knew entrusting Dud with responsibility always carried risk. Dud couldn't remember the month or year he was born, which said everything about the man. Ben guessed he was about 25, going on 7. Despite the goatee, he had a youthful, expressive face and big brown eyes that revealed everything he was thinking, which wasn't much. Ben had schooled the lad when he'd first joined Martius's crew. He was the only one who'd ever been grateful for it. While Dudley had life before him, Ben was a greying man of middling years. Yes, he may have slowed with age, but he could still chop the head off an ogre, no problem. And he didn't tire on the hunt when some of the younger ones flagged. He couldn't hunt alone, though. For all his idiosyncrasies, Dud was a decent shot with a crossbow. Still, they needed a crew equipped for all eventualities, and Ben had assembled one, or so he thought. I think it's this one, Dudley said, stopping outside a little house with a red door. How sure are you? Mostly. Ben shook his head, then banged on the door. Lucas, he called. A dog barked somewhere along the street. Another broke into a yappy song, too. A woman shouted, "Shut up!" out of a window to add to the cacophony. Ben banged again. A heartbeat later, the door swung open. A stout grey-haired woman in a ragged nightdress squinted up at them. The fuck do you two want? She said. Where's Lucas? Who in the seven hells is Lucas? Ben looked at Dudley. The oaf bit his lip. Wrong house, sorry, Ben said, making to turn away. You get me out of bed for this? 6 days a week I work. I get 1 day off, and that's today, and you wake me up early for some prick called Lucas. Well, I hope Lucas rots with leprosy, and you two get swallowed by a dragon. She hawked and spat in their direction and slammed the door. Nice work, Dud, Ben said, turning away to find Lucas peering out at them from the window of the house opposite. Lucas, I've got a serious bone to pick with you, Ben said, storming over. The face disappeared. Ben thumped on the door. He noticed it was green, not red, and glanced at Dudley. Get out here, you coward, he shouted through the wood. No answer. I'll break it down. I don't give a damn. A few more moments passed. Ben heard a latch open, and the door creaked outwards. A few paces back from the threshold, the slender, lanky frame of Lucas stood before them, body wrapped in a woolen sheet, covering all but his ankles and feet. He had hair thick enough for a sparrow to make its nest in, and it seemed to grow up rather than out or down. He had dark eyes and a wide, blotch-shaped nose which sat above thin lips and a hairless chin. He was around the same age as Dudley. Are you naked under there? Ben asked, eyeing the drooping sheet. Lucas nodded. Why? Got too warm while I slept. It's freezing outside, Ben said, a cynical squint to his eyes. I'm hot-blooded, he said with a shrug. Fair enough, Dudley said, standing behind Ben. Pack it in, Dud, Ben said, frowning. He turned back to Lucas. What's this I hear about you backing out? Who said I was backing out? I ain't backing out. Yeah? You don't sound so sure. Dud said you told him last night you wanted to go back to Martius, Ben said, hiking a thumb at Dudley. What you say that for, Dud? Lucas snapped. Dudley's gaze was fixed on the ground. We agreed we'd do this together, Lucas, Ben said. You know the deal. We need a trapper to catch these fuckers, and you're the best we got. Back out now and this falls apart, and I'll be honest, Lucas, I'd be pretty pissed off if you did that to us now. If this doesn't work, I've got nothing. We've all got nothing. None of us wants to go back to Martius. Do you? He treated you like a dumb mutt. Ben's stern look morphed into a smile. Anyway, do you seriously think he'll take you back? Turncoats and traitors, he called us. He told Billy to spread the word that we had a bounty on our heads until I talked him round. We're his competition now, remember? Lucas nodded, his face solemn under the blanket. It is nice not getting kicked up the arse all the time, he said. That's the spirit. I don't know why you're getting itchy feet anyway. We've got our first bounty to work on, our first shot at going it alone, Ben said, holding up a sheet of parchment containing the terms of the job. Oh yeah, what is it? Lucas said, perking up. A drake has been getting fat off goats up in the hills west of here. The mayor's paying 100 silvers for its head. Damn, we could buy our own tavern for that much. Anyone else taking it on? One crew run by a woman called Marissa, but they ain't been back in weeks, so the mayor reckons they swerved it. Or the drake got them, Dudley said. Ben gave him a scowl. Drake as in a duck? Lucas asked. Nah, it's not a duck, Lucas. Drakes are little dragon bastards with no wings. We took one out with Martius years ago. Nice easy job. When was that? Dudley asked. Before you joined, Ben said. Anyway, get dressed and pack your shit. Hilda said she'd meet us by the well at dawn, and you know what she gets like if we keep her waiting. Whose house is this, anyway? He asked, peering inside. My cousin's, Lucas said. Ben looked at him, eyes narrowing. Fair enough. Where is the oath? Hilda asked, looking up from her whetstone and hunting knife. Her glacier blue eyes held the sternness of a priestess, and the tightness of her blonde, plaited hair only added to the severity. The crooked scar that ran up the side of her right cheek completed the impression of someone you didn't want to get stuck in a confined space with. He's coming, Ben said. He will hold us back, I tell you, Hilda said, shaking her head. She sat on a bench beside the well, longbow resting against her travel pack. Ben had served with Hilda and Martius's crew for years. She'd led them to their targets more than once, and Ben had seen her slaughter a pack of goblins alone, but she'd also led their loot cart over the edge of a cliff, and once took the crew on a week-long hike along a dead trail, so she remained as much of a wild card as Dud and Lucas. Ben sat down next to Hilda and took out an apple from his pack. He bit a hearty chunk out of it and looked at her and Dudley. It wasn't their fault, he knew. Some people were good at things, and others beggar belief with their idiocy. Having a crew made up of the latter wasn't ideal. Ben knew that was more of a damning reflection on him. For years, he'd schooled the newcomers to Martius's crew, made sure they kept their heads, treated wounds, set up camp and cooked. He might not have been at the forefront of the action, but he was an important part of the operation. Martius didn't see it like that. More of a woman than the women in the crew, he'd say, and that lack of respect set the tone for all that followed. It'd become a rite of passage to get your first group laugh mocking Ben. He hated every moment of it, and if he reacted, it made things much worse. He'd hoped they'd grow bored and instead begin to see his worth. That was a fool's hope. Cuts of the bounties were given to those who killed and slaughtered, while people like Ben took a meagre wage and bed and board. Ben got his sword bloody, of course, but he wasn't one of the maniacs charging head first into the den of a wyvern. Life under Martius's rule didn't reward the cautious man. When Ben had asked for a percentage of the takings as a fair reflection of his contribution, Martius had laughed so hard that those sleeping at the inn complained to the landlord about being woken up. Seeing Martius's round face convulsing with laughter was the fuel Ben had needed to start his own crew and break away. And what a crew it was. Dudley, who'd follow him unwittingly into a basilisk's cave. Hilda, who despised Martius and most of the crew and couldn't wait to jump, and Lucas, a trapper famous for letting more out of his traps than keeping in, and even he wasn't entirely on board. Ben spat out an apple pip. I need an ale, he said. No ale till the job's done, Hilda said. Ben spat out another pip. A horse whickered off to their right, and he glanced over. A frown formed on his face. What? Hilda asked, turning to look. Fuck. A booming laugh filled the square. Well, looky here, fellas. It's Ben the Boot and his band of traitors. Martius sat astride his black stallion, his chest plate glinting in the spring sun, that famous double-bladed axe swinging from the saddle. Like the hero the world regarded him as, the wind blew his hair, though it wasn't as thick and dark as when Ben first met him. Already, a few onlookers had recognized him and were gathering. They saw people like Martius as heroes, noble warriors keeping the beasts from the door of humanity. Ben spat another pip and stood. Hilda joined him. Dudley trailed behind. Remember what I said the last time I saw you, Benzan? Martius said. We're on neutral ground, Martius. Nobody's stepping on toes. Depends on the reason why you're here, Martius said, moving his horse closer. Ben was smaller than the average man, and the stallion loomed a good head or two above him. We're just passing through, restocking. Is that so? Martius turned to his crew. Ominous laughter rippled among them, a joke that Ben, Dud, and Hilda weren't in on. Funny, a little birdie told me that you've been sniffing around for bounties. Something about a drake, I hear, Martius said. Ben had no more pips to spit, but if he did, he'd aim one at Martius's gloating face. The bastard had informants everywhere. Mayoral and sheriff's officers were the sources of bounties, so it was smart to have someone on the inside sharing information about what was available and who was chasing it. Records were always kept. Any monster hunter had to register their intent with the vendor before they set off on a hunt. Holding your tongue makes you look guilty, Benzan. Another quality to add to your list. Useless, traitorous, and guilty, Martius said. A poor joke, but his crew were a band of serious arse-lickers and offered a chorus of laughter, which their leader lapped up. You know what it means if you go after that Drake's head. You'd be stepping those tiny feet of yours onto my big boots. I've gutted men for less, Ben, and you've witnessed it. He moved the stallion closer, so close Ben could feel the heat of its breath, smell its unwashed body. Martius hadn't replaced him then. Ben was the one who had looked after his horse. Martius leaned forward in his saddle, hanging over him like a bird of prey about to strike. But since it's such a nice day, how about we play a game instead? Game? Hilda asked. Yes, my sour-faced lady, a game. A wager, in fact. I let you go for this bounty, but I'll be going for it too. If you slay the Drake and claim the bounty first, then I promise not to interfere with your crew, if you can call it that, for a whole year. You can hunt as you please, and if we come across each other, we pretend we don't exist. And if you win, then all of you rejoin my crew, but you work for free for a year. Martius gave him his broadest grin. I'm good, Ben said. As much as he wanted the freedom to pursue bounties without the threat of death hanging over them, another year with Martius would kill his soul. And after everything that had happened with the breakaway, Ben was pretty sure Martius would see him dead before that year was out. No, you don't want to earn a proper living for yourself, for your crew. I thought you wanted to prove yourself. Here's your opportunity. Where are your balls, Benzan? Or is it true that you don't have any? The laughter erupted. Ben looked at Hilda, her jaw locked in anger and determination. She'd agreed to something as absurd as this out of spite alone. He looked at Dud, his eyes wide with concern. The fool didn't like conflict much. How he ended up in this line of work, Ben did not know. I'm sure. We're all good. If you go for the Drake, good luck with it. At that, Ben turned away, picking up as many bags as he could and hoping that the others followed suit. To his relief, they did. You're a fool, Benzan. A dead fool, Martius shouted after them. Ben didn't look back. Let's find Lucas and get moving, he muttered, hoping the others didn't hear the wind escape his arse. Chapter 2. They found Lucas hurrying toward them with his worldly possessions bundled up in his arms. Where's your bag? Dudley asked. I thought you had it, Lucas replied, frowning. Why would we have your bag, Lucas? You stayed with your cousin, as you call her, Ben said. What's that supposed to mean? Lucas's frown deepened. We ain't got time for this, Hilda interjected. Martius just rolled into town, and he knows we're going after the Drake. Shit, Lucas said. One of his shirts dropped to the ground. He bent down to pick it up and dropped more. Shit indeed, Ben said. He's going after it too. We've got a head start, but there won't be any point if you keep titting about. Here, I've got a spare bag you can have. Shove your stuff in there, and let's get marching. Led by a scowling Hilda, they departed Pancho's hold and set off squelching along an overgrown road that wound westwards into the woods. Nobody spoke. Ben guessed they all had the same thing on their mind. Martius. What a bastard that man was. But Ben had to blame himself too. He should have led the crew in a different direction. Instead, he'd gotten excited by news of the Drake and the bounty's hefty payout. The Drakes he'd encountered over the years hadn't put up much fight. Get close enough to their toothy mouth and they could chomp a person in two, but they were stupid beasts and only the size of a mountain lion. A few arrows and bolts could get the job done. The old road narrowed into a game trail, the trees shuffling closer to hide the sun. It was cool under the spring canopy, the air fresh with the scent of overnight rain. They moved along the trail with purpose, boots slipping in the mud. More than once, Ben caught Hilda looking back to see if anyone followed. When she saw how far behind Dudley and Lucas were, she huffed. We've got to try and find this Drake today if we're to stay ahead of Martius. You know how he works, Hilda said to the group. Pick up the pace, or else he'll find you too. Martius had scouts working day and night when hunting a target. It wouldn't take long for him to track down the Drake. Is it much further to the hills? Dud asked. How can you be tired already? Hilda spat. We've walked for miles, Lucas said. We've only been walking a couple of hours and you've been dragging your feet the whole way. You're not going to be too knackered to fight, are you? Hilda asked. Lucas's face bunched up in offence. This Drake's got no chance. Have you ever seen a Drake? Hilda asked him. Can't say I have, Lucas said. He thought it was a duck at first, Ben said. Hilda barked with laughter. I ain't wrong, Lucas spat. No, you ain't. But you ain't right either. I'd much rather face a duck than the little cousin of a dragon, Ben said. You said they don't breathe fire, though. Yeah, as far as I know. Good. Why are you so worried about fire? He paused and all eyes turned to him. I've got a fear of being burned alive. Nasty way to go, Hilda said. And the smell. Stop it, Lucas said, turning away as if fighting the urge to vomit. The others smirked at his discomfort. When did you become scared of fire? Ben asked with only a hint of mockery. When I was a kid, our village got attacked, and our house got set on fire. I was the only one who made it out. Lucas looked at the ground as he walked. The colour in his cheeks faded, while shame flashed hot on Ben's. He wasn't sure what to say. I lost my family too, Hilda said, filling the silence. They were killed by trolls. Never stood a chance, she said. I lost my ma and pa too, Ben added. They got sick, and all I could do was watch them wither. That's hard, guys, I'm sorry, Dudley said. I never knew my pa, and as far as I know, my ma is still working up in Hinkerton village. Oh yeah, what does she do? She's a bath maid, Dudley said. She didn't do a very good job of teaching you how to wash, Hilda said. They all laughed, even Dud. It's funny how we ended up together, Ben said. Or rather, how we all ended up killing monsters, Hilda said, looking for some kind of revenge. The conversation simmered, and for a moment, Ben's thoughts drifted through the ill-visited corridors of his past, moving through the cold, unloving streets of his youth, where the game each day was to find food and coin enough to survive, while fighting off a mass of other starving kids in the process. What do you think Martius will do to us if we run into him? Dudley asked. Nobody, not even Ben, had an answer for that one. He'll be reasonable, I'm sure, Ben said. He could sense the nervousness in his question. What was the point of troubling Dud further? We might not run into him at all. It's a big area we're dealing with. Ben's words didn't stop Dud from looking back over his shoulder, eyes lingering on the trees. Soon those trees ended, and a steep fern-covered hill barred their path. Can we eat before we climb this? I'm starved, Lucas said. Busy night with your cousin? Ben asked, throwing Lucas a look. The young fool frowned and shook his head. Ben caught a smile on Hilda's face. She threw down her pack and pulled out their meagre supplies. Oatcakes and rye bread, some nuts too. This food tastes like shit, Lucas said. Well, I do apologize, Master Lucas. Perhaps you'd like to do the cooking tonight, Ben said. I ain't much of a cook. I know you ain't. Poor Dud was down a tent after the last time. The fire nearly set the whole forest ablaze. The water spilt on my cook fire. What was I meant to do? I only got a candle from inside a tent. Next thing I know, the whole damn thing was on fire. And then you're running for the river with a whole riddle bucket. Get back and there's nothing left in it, Ben said, bursting into laughter. One of the few good memories from Martius's crew. They all shared a laugh, even Hilda. It didn't last long, though, at least not for Ben. He kept expecting Martius's booming voice to echo toward them, which didn't help the knot swelling in his gut. From the frequent looks toward the tree line, it seemed the others felt it too. Bags repacked and on shoulders again, they set off along a goat trail that zigzagged up the hill. I still want to know how a drake made it here, Hilda said to Ben as they climbed. Lucas and Dud hung back, dragging their bodies like tired teenagers. You said they come from your homeland. That's pretty far, Ben said. 50 leagues or more. The climate is so different here. Back home in Ulfulfa, They roam the dry southern plains, feeding on horses and buffalo. It all just feels a bit odd to me. You think it could be something else? Ben asked. It's a possibility. What else looks like a drake, lives around here, and likes the taste of mutton and goat? Maybe we'll find out soon, but I'm also starting to wonder whether it's a ruse, and an elaborate one at that, a way for Martius to get his own back. Ben didn't have an answer for that, but she was right. It was the kind of thing his twisted mind would concoct. The going was slow. Halfway up, Dud lost balance and fell, sending a cloud of dust and rocks into Lucas's face. Watch out, you clod, Lucas said, spitting grit and aiming a swipe at Dudley. He jumped to evade him, and Lucas ended up punching the wooden frame of his crossbow. Ah, you bastard, he shouted. Well, if Martius and his crew were trying to find us, they won't have trouble now, Ben said, shaking his head. Red-faced and breathless, they reached the top, welcomed by a cooling wind that carried with it the smell of the pine woods below. Damn, that hill's bigger than it looks, Dud said, hands on knees. This bloody Drake best had be up here, Hild, Lucas said, a look of agony on his sweaty face. He cradled his bruised knuckles. It's not up here. I told you that at the bottom. We came up here so that we can find streams to lead us to caves. An even more pained expression took hold of Lucas's face. Weariness prevented him from arguing back, and he collapsed onto his arse with his back to a rock. Which way now? Ben asked. The tattooed woman stared off into the distance, as if looking for something beyond the vision of man. We go north and walk the fells. She turned and looked him dead in the eye. You worry too much, Benson. We are free now. You fret as if Martius is here. Only the gods look down at us now. Ben frowned. I worry that if we don't find it today, he'll be right on top of us. Then we'll have two monsters to contend with. Hilda was right. The bastard wasn't here. But he didn't feel it in his gut. The fear was stitched into him, pulling tight whenever he tried to breathe easy. All his adult life, he had served Martius. He hadn't thought much about it at the time. He just did what he was told, and he felt like he owed Martius for giving him a shot in the first place. But nothing Ben had done was enough. Martius mocked and humiliated him, and Ben had taken it, day after day, year after year. Liberation was the right thing to do. Making his own decisions, though, would take some getting used to. He looked at his crew. Hilda gnawed on a chunk of jerky. Lucas was already dozing against his pack. Dudley had a beetle crawling across his palm, watching it like it held the secrets of the gods. He wasn't quite sure how they'd managed to slay this Drake, but they'd try. We need to get a move on. We've got a lot of ground to cover, Ben said. None of them seemed ready to move. He aimed a kick at Lucas's foot, who groaned like a weary child. He hated to do so, but he allowed them a moment's rest. Instead, he turned his focus back in the direction they'd come from. Rolling hills stretched across the horizon, an unending sea of bumps and peaks. Pine forests dominated some slopes. Ice and snow still clung to the tops of the highest. Movement stirred in the wooded valley below. Ben froze. A dark shape emerged from the trees. Then another. The sun glinted off armor. Damn, he muttered. What is it? Dudley said. Ben didn't want to share the news. They're close, he said, voice a whisper, as the knots in his stomach tightened. Chapter 3. Talk was idle, heads down, feet marching. Nerves bubbled in Ben's gut. His jaw ached from grinding his teeth. At this rate, he'd grind them to the gums. So, is this what leading felt like? He feared he'd made a mistake going up against Martius. A fatal one, maybe. He'd seen Martius deal with competition plenty of times. No mercy shown, no evidence left, and if any questions were asked, he blamed the monsters. It was hard to shake the fear that their former crewmaster was going to do the same to them. If anything, Martius had even more of a reason. Ben knew he had to put that bastard out of his head now. If they were to succeed with this bounty, he had to focus on the job and forget the distractions. Easier said than done. To make matters rosier, the clouds had taken on an ominous hue. Heavy raindrops fell upon his balding pate before turning into a torrent, combining with the wind to drive into their faces. The glorious side of monster hunting. They followed a sheep trail across the fells. To their right, a drop of at least 60 feet sloped away toward a flatter, tree-filled base. To their left, the ground rose higher toward the peak and more hills beyond. The wind drowned out most sound, but Ben heard something that froze him in place. He turned and looked back. "Did anyone hear that?" he asked. "No, what was it?" Dudley said. "It sounded like old Badger's horn." "Badger? That griffin tore him up ages ago." "Aye, but his horn didn't. One of the other scouts must have picked it up. They'd only blow that horn if they found tracks," Hilda said. Nobody had anything to say to that. They all knew what it meant and took a moment to contemplate the prospect. "We need to move faster," Ben said, his heart beating harder against his rib cage. The trail rose up and down, teasing them with protection from the wind, only to climb upwards again and expose them to gales. The rain had made the stones beneath their feet slick. Mud clung to their boots to add to the slippiness. A heavy thud sounded behind. "Bastard!" Dudley shouted. Ben turned to find him on his back, arms spread, a long line in the mud behind him from where he'd slipped. Ben couldn't help but laugh, the first time his jaw had prized apart all day. "You okay, Dud?" he said, helping him up. "I'm covered," he said, mud-encased hands held aloft as he spun round to reveal his now brown cloak. "We'll find you a bathhouse later. We ain't got time now. You don't want Martius to find you stripped off washing yourself, do you?" Ben asked. The last thing Ben wanted to do was to stop. He could feel the eyes of Martius's scouts upon him. "Very funny," Dudley said, wiping mud from his hands. "This could be something here," Hilda shouted from up ahead, battling with the wind to be heard. Ben hurried to catch up to her. "See how the hill ahead bends to the left and disappears," she said, pointing. Ben could see little through the driving rain. He had no choice but to trust her. Hilda was right. A babbling stream had carved its way into the ground and ran down in a series of step-like waterfalls. They stopped near the edge, peering down, hoping to see the dark void of a cave in the rock face. Nothing. They hopped over the stream and continued on, keeping a good pace. Ben couldn't help but glance over his shoulder, couldn't help but wonder how close they were. More doubts had begun to creep into his mind. What if they didn't find the Drake? What if Martius caught up with them before they could? Would it be worth abandoning the job tonight if they had no joy? That would feel shameful, though. And what would the others do? Would they jump ship? They came to another stream, this one much wider and fuller from the rain. "There ain't no way across without getting your feet wet," Lucas said, shaking his head. "Your feet are already wet." "What difference is this going to make?" Hilda said. "Climb on Dudley's back if you like," Ben said. "Can I?" "No," Dudley spat. "Just take your boots off if you're so worried." Hilda forged ahead, boots on, the water level just below her knee. Ben followed, Dudley close behind. On the other side of the bank, Lucas tested the water with his bare feet, boots hanging around his neck, the bottom of his breeches rolled up. "Fuck me, it's cold," he said. "Just get on with it. Imagine Martius is behind you." "What?" "Martius is behind me." Lucas half turned and moved forward at the same time. He took a few steps forward and slipped over, falling head first into the water. He splashed about, limbs flailing like a cat in a water barrel. They all burst into laughter, but it died in their throats when Lucas didn't get himself upright. The rising water levels brought a rushing current that swept him away towards a waterfall. "Help!" he shouted through a mouthful of water. Ben threw himself into the stream. The weight of responsibility descended upon his shoulders. He couldn't let anything happen to anyone, not on their first job. His feet slipped on the smooth stones, the current buffeting his back, trying to knock him off balance. He reached for Lucas's cloak. His fingertips brushed the woolen hood. He dropped over the edge and out of sight. "Shit," Ben kept saying as he scrambled out of the water and to the edge to peer over. Lucas's lanky arms flapped about in a pool below. The first fall wasn't too steep, but it was the first of many as the stream meandered down. He just hoped Lucas didn't crack his head on a rock. "We're coming, Lucas!" Ben shouted. Lucas dropped over the next fall and they lost sight of him. "Hilda, can you see a way down?" She was already scanning the edge of the stream, seeking the best route. "Yes, there is a trail, but steep. With the mud and water, it will be dangerous. Do not fall." Good fucking advice, Ben thought to himself as they all hurried back across the stream and down the path that Hilda had spotted. Only it wasn't much of a path, but the bed of an old stream, and with the rain, water had returned to loosen the rocks and mud they stepped on. A great chunk of rock broke away beneath Ben's feet and rolled down the hill, sending him on his arse. Dudley was quick to help him up and pat him on the back. Up ahead, Hilda had made good progress, but she too slipped onto her rump and took a few moments to get up. She waited for them to catch up. "You okay?" Ben asked. "Damn sharp rock," she said, holding up the side of her hand where blood ran from a cut. "We're near the bottom now. I'll clean it there." The ground levelled, but the path had taken them away from the stream, which had wound off to the left. They headed toward it, moving through dense grass. "Lucas," Dudley called. Ben winced at the shout. The wind and the rain had eased now, and he wondered whether their shouts would carry to the ears of Martius's scouts. A few calls, he decided, wouldn't hurt. The sooner they found him, the better. The murmur of water came to their ears, and they angled for a high point where they could see both the stream and its banks. "I can't see any sign of him," Hilda said, scanning left and right. The stream wound its way around a rocky outcrop and into a dark woodland. "Could he have gone further downstream than this?" Ben asked, moving toward the water's edge. "Maybe. If he hit his head and knocked himself out, then he'd drift until he got snagged on something," Hilda said matter-of-factly. "We need to be sure he's not further up too," Ben said. "He may have climbed out or got stuck, as you said. How about you two head upstream and I'll head down?" The pair set off on their climb upstream, while Ben headed for the woods further below. The rain tended not to bother him much. He quite liked the cool drops on his skin and the smell of freshness it stirred in the plants and trees, a much finer smell than the rotten stench of dead ogres and trolls, goblins and griffins, not to mention his fellow crewmates. Yes, there was a sense of glory that came with hunting monsters, man overcoming beast, slaying the creature that threatened the township, and poor little Jimmy with his gap-toothed smile. But it was dirty business, not one for a person who didn't like the feel of blood on their hands, be it your own, your friends, or a monster's. Then there were the long hours spent tracking and hunting, camping in the pissing rain, never getting warm, feet always wet, listening to your crew's unhinged flatulence, and eating little else but dried meat and oat pottage. Ben never minded all of that, though. Life growing up had been worse. His dad had been a gambling man, and that meant a rambling man, and the family followed in tow. He ran out of places to run to in the end, and took a beating he never rose up from. Ma found a new sense of freedom. After that, and the future she saw for herself didn't involve Ben or his sister, Millie. They woke one day to find her gone, a trunk and stuff too. The pair of them had ended up on the street. Millie took residence in the local bathhouse. Shit pay, shit work, and too many shriveled pricks, but somehow she found a decent man, married him, and left for a life neither of them thought they'd ever know. Ben had slugged it out on the streets, fighting other kids outside the tavern for coins from the punters. One of those punters had been Martius. He'd been an up-and-coming monster hunter then, but he saw something in Ben, pep, he called it, and gave him a chance to earn glory at his side. But he was free of that now. He had to keep reminding himself of that. It was a new way of living, but he didn't feel like he was doing a good job of it. He knew Lucas was an accident-prone simpleton, the only trapper Ben had ever seen walk into his own bear trap minutes after setting it. He should have gone back and helped him across the stream, carried him even. To Ben's left, the water ran down in a swift torrent, a few feet deep at least, and capable of carrying someone without a problem. A little further on, he heard the crashes of a waterfall. The looming oak trees fell away, and the water dropped into a deep, circular pool. Upon the opposite side, the mouth of a cave gaped wide in a limestone wall. A knife of despair sank into Ben's gut. Lying on the muddy bank before the cave was Lucas, face down and deathly still. Chapter 4. Lucas, Ben called. His feet slipped in the mud as he scrambled down the ridge, grabbing onto trees and branches to stop himself from falling. He dove headfirst into the pool and swam to the far bank. The chill of the water stole his breath. This was how Lucas would have felt. He grabbed his stricken companion and turned him over. He was pale, lips blue, a patch of hair matted with blood. His chest was still. Ben pushed down on it, just as one of their old crewmates from the Western Isles had taught him. 1, 2, 3, nothing. A wave of panic rose up through him. He tried again. Come on, you stupid bastard. He couldn't let him die. Not here, not now. Ben pushed down with more force. He closed his eyes. He couldn't look at Lucas's lifeless face. Water spurted out of Lucas's mouth, right into Ben's mouth. The pair of them burst into a fit of coughing. Lucas keeled over, gasping. Fuck, am I alive? He said between breaths. Just about, I think. Lucas sat up, rubbed his head and winced. Everything's spinning. Guessing your noggin took a whack on the way down. All I remember was not being able to get my head above the water. Next thing I know, I was dreaming. It was weird. I was a dog and I remember barking at a man and trying to run away, but I had a chain around my neck and he held the other end. I ran so far and couldn't go any further, and then I started sinking into the ground, and all I could hear was him laughing. Then I woke up and saw you. Some dream, boy. I'm glad you're okay. And you found a cave. We should throw you over waterfalls more often, Ben said, slapping him on the shoulder and climbing up the bank. The ground was muddy and smooth, no grip at all, like a slide down into the water. Ben went around it, using the protruding roots of a tree as stepping stones. At the top, he paused and looked at the cave, then at the smoothness of the mud. He frowned. What you looking at? Lucas asked, climbing up behind him. Does that look natural to you? Ben said, pointing. Could be runoff that's making it smooth. It's raining now and I ain't seeing runoff, are you? Lucas shrugged. Ben's attention turned to the cave. A draught blew from within its jagged half-moon entrance, cooling his sodden body. A shiver ran down his spine. He shook it off and stared deeper into the void. What gear have you got on you? He asked Lucas. Nothing. I don't know where my bag is. I ain't even got boots. They got washed away. Dudley's stupid idea to take them off. My feet are like ice blocks. Will my toes fall off? We'll get you some new boots, but first we need to check this cave. But why now? What about the others? They're up the hill looking for you. Shouldn't we wait for them? We won't go far in. Just have a look around for some clues. We don't have much time, remember? I ain't got a weapon, though. Ben unsheathed the knife on his belt and handed it to him. How am I going to kill a drake with that? Aim for its eyes. Ben stepped into the gloom. He didn't like caves. He liked predictability. And in absolute gloom, there was no predicting what awaited him. Even now, a decade on, the 12-legged inscorpid still visited his dreams. When he woke, the scar its acid had left on his arm itched and burned, as it had back in the mines of Nokai. It could have been much worse. A few paces further forward, and he would have ended up, like his old pal Mingus, dissolving into a pool of bubbling gore. Ben dropped his travel bag, drew his sword, and unshouldered his kite shield. The sound of the waterfall had fallen away more than he expected it to. Upon the draught, he caught the earthy smell of rot. He led Lucas over to the right-hand wall and followed it as the tunnel narrowed. The light coming through the cave mouth faded, so too the murmur of the water, leaving the sound of their footsteps and the occasional skitter of a rock and a suffocating silence. Ben's foot kicked something heavier. He scrambled about to find it and picked it up. Bone, like a leg bone from a sheep or goat. Ben's heart pounded his rib cage like a smithy's anvil. He dropped the bone and didn't want to go further, but he had to know, had to be sure. Stay focused now, Lucas, Ben whispered. He couldn't see Lucas's face well enough to tell if he was afraid, but from the whimpering noise he made in response, he guessed he was. Ben tightened the grip on his sword and led on, fighting the voice in his mind telling him to turn around and flee. His foot hit another bone, larger than the first, covered in blood, with sinew and wool attached. The stench of faeces and foul meat hit his nose. Another step forward revealed the source, the half-eaten remains of a sheep, its stomach torn open, head missing, its limbs gnawed to the bone. It was the confirmation he needed. Only a creature with sharp teeth and a powerful maw could carry out such damage. Lucas shuffled about behind Ben. He kicked a rock, which broke the delicate stillness of the cave as it bounced off into the gloom. My God's damn toe, he yelped with ill restraint, dropping his dagger as he flapped about. The clang echoed along the tunnel. Shut your damn trap, Lucas, Ben said. He stared into the darkness of the tunnel, listening over Lucas's moaning and the beat of his heart in his ears. He heard a sound like a sack being dragged across the rocky ground. It lasted a moment, then stillness again. Lucas shut up when he heard it. Heat flooded Ben's body as panic rose like a geyser. It moved again, sliding across the stone, louder than before. Run, Lucas! Ben shouted as he turned. He needn't have bothered. Lucas was already a few paces ahead of him. A deep growl bounced off the narrow walls. The dragging sound returned, and with it, the thuds of feet rumbling through the ground. The small light of the cave mouth hovered in the gloom. Lucas staggered, and Ben crashed into him. Ben used his shield to bounce off the cave wall and kept his feet. Lucas somehow kept upright too. Ben longed to glance back, to judge the beast's distance, but a single misstep meant death. He kicked rocks, and his toes erupted in pain. The light was growing, but so were the grunts and growls of the drake. Push, Lucas, push, we're nearly there, he shouted, his words urging himself on as much as his crewmate. The cave mouth yawned before them. Ben put his arm around Lucas, grabbed his shoulder, and together jumped into the pool. The cold water went up Ben's nose, into his mouth, and fought to shock him. He kept his breath and refused to let go of his sword. He kicked his legs and broke the surface, and regretted doing so. The drake stood in all its glory before him, 2 front feet perched on a rock, looking down at him bobbing in the pool. From head to toe, it stood as tall as a man. From nose to tail, it was twice that size. Its scales were the colour of seaweed, a few missing and discoloured, and around its stout neck, patches had flaked away to leave lesions and sores. Its head was dragon-like, with piercing orange eyes surrounded by bony spikes that ran all the way down its long nose and jaw. Its snarl revealed a legion of sharp yellow teeth. A powerful tail, tipped with even bigger and more offensive bony spikes, cracked the air like an angry cat. It's why some people called them dragon cats. The drake lowered its head beneath its shoulders, ready to pounce. Ben looked the beast in the eye, unsure what to do, when Lucas emerged from beneath the water like a hero rising from the dead, only for him to descend into a mess of flailing limbs and panicked, gargled shouts. The drake's focus turned to Lucas, and Ben seized his chance to move to the closest bank. It didn't stop the drake from pouncing. Whether through instinct or an inability to swim, Lucas ducked down under the water, and the drake went in after him. Lucas! Ben shouted. Bubbles pierced the surface. Lucas emerged, hurled through the air to bounce off a boulder beside the water. He landed in a motionless heap on the ground. The drake emerged a heartbeat later, and Ben lashed out with his sword. The tip of his blade cut the beast's side. It hissed and swung its tail in response. Ben parried with his shield, but it sent him back a few paces, onto slippery rocks. The drake found its footing in shallower water and leapt at him. It opened its mouth, trying to engulf him. Ben planted his feet as best he could and got behind his shield. Its jaws clamped down on the rim, pushed him back and threatened to bowl him over. The wood cracked and splintered. Ben fought back, sinking his sword into the drake's gut a few times. The drake screeched, pulled away, and tore the shield from his arm with a nasty jolt that left him on the floor. Ben scrambled back to his feet just as the drake's tail came flying at him. The blow sent him backwards, the fall knocking the wind from his lungs. Ben raised his head and saw the drake's orange eyes locked onto him, only for it to turn away and look upwards, behind him. A crossbow bolt whizzed through the air and sank into the drake's shoulder. It screeched and hissed and staggered backwards towards a drop to another pool. Ben regained his feet and found Dudley upon the ridge, reloading his crossbow, and Hilda scrambling down with sword in hand to get to him. He laughed, despite himself. They'd come. Ben got to his feet, retrieved his sword from the mud, and turned to face the drake. Only it wasn't there. It dropped down, Hilda said. It will be stalking us, she said, her short sword raised as she scanned the trees and bushes around them. Ben couldn't hear anything over the rush of the waterfall. I've got you covered, Dudley said from up on the ridge. They approached the drop where the drake had disappeared down, weapons raised. A patch of dark, sticky blood covered some stones at the bottom, with a trail of it heading to the right. A stick snapped off in the brush. It's circling, Hilda said, spinning round. Ben turned as the drake leapt from the bushes, right at Dudley. Ben and Hilda both called out. The drake's claws were splayed, jaw wide and ready to snap. Dudley saw them pointing, turned, eyes widened, then he threw himself to the ground. The drake missed and skidded into a thicket of bushes. In his panic, Dudley dropped the crossbow. He lost his footing too. He rolled forward on his shoulder, bounced down the drop, thumped his head against a rock, and passed out. Fuck, Ben said, looking at his motionless friend. We need that crossbow, Hilda said. Ben spied it lying in the mud about 30 feet from them, up on the ridge. I'll distract it. Just don't miss, Hilda said. He gave her a nod and set off at a sprint. He reached the ridge and pulled himself up, mud all over his hands and under his fingernails. Behind him, Hilda called out and shouted, waving her arms as the wounded drake rose to its feet again. It had a choice, Ben or Hilda, and it eyed them both. Ben's arms burned, but he climbed on, each grasp a war against failure. At last he was up, and the bow lay before him. To his right, the drake jumped down onto a rock, heading toward Hilda, head bowed low to the ground, ready to leap. Ben's mud-encased fingers grabbed the bow. He took aim at the drake, but it darted forward. Hilda dove to the right. The drake whipped its tail around and caught her on the head. The force sent her backwards, over the drop and out of sight. The drake looked down after her. Ben had his chance. Crossbow squirming in his muddy grip, he aimed for its back and squeezed the trigger. The bolt sank right into its side, exactly where he wanted. The drake recoiled. It howled and hissed as Ben looked on, smiling proudly at his shot. Those orange eyes locked onto him again. Fighting its pain, the drake pushed itself up onto all fours, weak at first, but then it started to come at him. Ben reached for his dagger and remembered he'd given it to Dudley. All he had was an unloaded crossbow, but the drake wasn't to know that, and it eyed him warily. It growled. Ben lunged forward with the crossbow. The drake backed off, but then it came at him, quicker than he anticipated. Its head came into range, and he swung downwards with the butt of the bow. It struck the drake square in the nose, and its body barged into him, sending him onto his back and into the mud. He gasped, fought to push himself up, but a weight pressed down upon him. Claws poked through his leather armor and into his flesh. The drake loomed over him, its hot, stinking breath rushing over his face. A long globule of stinking drool dropped into Ben's eyes. It was warm and sticky and obscured his vision. It might make it easier, he thought, as he resigned himself to his fate. Its claws pushed deeper into his body, his heart doing its best to beat them away. He fought to keep piss from filling his breeches as he waited for those teeth to sink in. He focused on the waterfall's hush, the soft, clean sound of life, a final blessing before the teeth came. He heard a clap like thunder, and the weight pushing down on his chest released and shifted to his legs. A new smell hit his nose, powerful and gag-inducing, burning meat. Arms free, Ben wiped away the drool from his face and found the drake spread across his legs, still as forgotten memories, smoke rising from its torso. Ben looked around as much as his trapped body would allow. Upon the ridge, a group of silhouetted figures looked down at him. One of them he recognized right away from the shape of his body and the gloating laugh pouring out of his mouth. Marteus. Beside him stood a man half his size, holding himself up with the aid of a staff. If it isn't our favourite traitor Benzan, Martius said. He headed down the path toward him, his crew in tow, along with the mysterious man with his staff, who seemed pale and sweaty, as if he was fighting to stay conscious. He had dark eyes, set back deeply in his face, with wisps of hair clinging to his scalp. He looked like a man half dead. No one else seemed to care about his welfare. Martius stopped before Ben, who kicked and pushed to get free of the dead drake. Well, Martius said, arms outstretched. Well, what? Ben spat back, trying to free himself still. Aren't you going to thank me for saving your life? I thank you before you rob me, is that it? Rob you of what? From what I could tell, your crew are all out cold, if not dead, and you are about to have your head chewed off. The only thing you've been robbed of is your dignity. Martius and his crew laughed that one up. Ben managed to free his left ankle. I will say this to you, though, Benzan. You've got a pair of plums on you. A juicier pair than I thought. I didn't think you'd even get close to this drake, and I certainly didn't expect you to kill it. That's a tough job even for our crew. It's why we recruited old Colmog over there, Martius said, pointing at the man with the staff. Colmog is a mage we found not long after you left. What do you say, lads? Has Colmog earned his bread? Martius said to his adoring audience. They cheered and whooped and chanted Colmog's name. Colmog, Colmog, Colmog. Someone slapped Colmog on the back and sent him staggering forward before he righted himself with his staff. Is he all right? He looks fit to drop, Ben said. He's fine. Old Colmog might not look up to much, but he can frazzle a dragon if he wants. He just gets a bit tired afterwards is all. You'll be fine in a few hours, won't you, Cole? Martius said. Colmog gave the feeblest of nods, his eyes closed. Don't fret about him, though, Ben. It's your neck you need to be worried about. The tone of Martius's voice changed like the direction of the wind. I told you when you left that if I ran into you, I'd do what I'd done to plenty of other crews before. You've seen it with your own eyes, Benzan, but you went after the same bounty anyway. Again, I warned you, but you didn't listen, and here we are. You've had plenty warnings, so I can only assume you're trying to take the piss out of me, trying to disrespect me in front of my crew. Is that it? After all we've been through, Benzan, after all I've given you, well, I don't take kindly to that. Martius drew the double-bladed axe from over his shoulder. He hefted it in his two hands, finding the perfect balance, and having found it, stepped closer to Ben. I warned you, Benzan. You only have yourself to blame. The axe went up. Ben fought to pull his other foot free. He dug into the ground with his hands, clawed at the mud. His foot came loose. Light glinted off the steel blade, and the axe fell. Chapter 5. The axe sliced through flesh, muscle, bone. Ben felt no pain. In fact, nothing changed at all. He willed open his eyes, worried his brain was still functioning like some dead men do, and found Martius lifting up the drake's head, laughing like a man who had it all. You led me to an easy bounty, Benzan, Martius said, and a rewarding one at that. Your fuck-up has saved your life. As you know, we pay a price when we fail, and your price is this bounty and me sparing yours and your crew's lives, if any of them are still breathing. That's fair, don't you think? He turned back to his doting audience and barked a laugh, which they echoed like a choir. Hopefully there's more to come, Martius said, turning back to Ben, his tone taking a sudden, ominous turn as he glared into his eyes. He stepped toward him, broad frame looming tall. Ben thought he might swing that axe, and when Martius lifted his hand, he recoiled. A chuckling Martius patted him on the head as a father would his child. It's a good job you didn't take that bet. You'd be carrying this stinking bastard home for me, he said, thrusting the drake's head toward his, its black snake-like tongue flopping about in its mouth. Ben ducked away again, which refueled Martius's laughter. Here, take this, he shouted, before tossing the head at the young lad with ginger hair. It flew with such force that it knocked him over, which brought on more howls of laughter. See you soon, Benson, Martius said, that dangerous look in his eyes once more. Ben watched them go, holding his breath, and sighed as they moved out of view. That fleeting relief was washed away by annoyance, and a frown became fixed on his face. What just happened? He thought himself Drake food, and in swooped Martius to save his life, rob his prize, and mock him in the process. He felt tears well in the corner of his eyes, threatening to run down rivers that had long since dried. There was no time to think of himself, though. He pushed back his emotions and looked around for the others. He found Dudley nearby, his legs sticking out of a bush. "Dud!" he shouted, grabbing his arm and lifting him onto even ground. He had a bump like a molehill on his forehead, but somehow wasn't bleeding. Still, it looked painful, the area already bruising. Ben shook him again. He groaned. "Good. You're alive at least," Ben said. Ben searched around for Lucas. He found him in the mud beside the pond, face down, but to his relief, he too was moving, pushing himself up and turning around to reveal a mud-encrusted face. "Nothing new with you, Lucas," Ben said. 2 out of 2. He hurried over to the waterfall Hilda had been thrown over. He peered down, saw nothing but rocks, ferns, and water. "Hilda!" he called out. What if she saw Martius and ran? He couldn't blame her if she had. He promised to kill them after all. If Hilda left them, though, they'd be pretty done for. Dudley and Lucas could barely make breakfast between them. Ben's frown deepened. Have they gone? Ben looked around for the voice. Hilda's head popped out of some fern bushes. "Aye, they've gone," Ben said, allowing himself a smile. He was glad to see she'd stuck around, and he had to admit it was a little satisfying to see her humbled. Hilda stepped out of the bushes, right arm holding her left. "You hurt?" Ben asked. "I landed on my shoulder. I think it popped out. It's happened a few times before." "Can you move it?" "Not enough to give you the middle finger. Let's make camp in the cave, and I'll patch you up." The fire crackled, its smoke filling the cave with the smell of pine. They allowed themselves the comfort of a good-sized fire with the cave's former resident lying headless outside. "We came close, at least," Dudley said, holding a smooth rock to the bump on his head. It hadn't done much to take down the swelling, despite Lucas's grand claims of it working without fail. "We don't get paid for clothes, do we, Dud?" Ben said, his patience ground to dust. "No fools giving us a bag of coins for getting our asses whipped. Damn, if it wasn't for Martius, we'd probably all be Drake shit this time tomorrow." He was finding it hard to keep his emotions in check. "I don't feel like you can criticize me this time," Lucas said. He was wrapped up once again in a woolen blanket, his sodden clothes hanging off sticks close to the fire. "And why is that?" Hilda said flatly. "I was the one who found the Drake." Hilda laughed, though it turned into a grimace, and she clutched her arm, now in a sling after Ben helped put it back into place. "By found, do you mean washed up unconscious outside its cave?" "Still found it. You weren't much use in the fight, though, were you?" Ben said, frowning. "And what did you do apart from get drooled over?" Lucas said. "You were as useful as a damn pork chop." "Yeah, well, at least I'm not banging my cousin." Lucas's cheeks flushed. He stood up, cloak dropping to the ground to reveal his skinny, half-naked frame. "That damn Drake nearly killed me, and what did you do to help? I said we should wait for the other two, but you insisted on going into the cave, and then we all nearly died." "You ain't Gary the Great. Who do you think you are taking on a Drake alone?" Hilda said. "It just came at us," Ben said, trying to defend himself. "But you went into the cave?" Hilda asked, voice cold. Ben had to nod. "You should have waited," Hilda said. "So you're agreeing with daft arse now?" Ben asked her, exasperated. Heat burned in his cheeks. Lucas scowled at him, anger in his eyes amongst the gormlessness. Dudley looked at the ground. He no doubt hated every moment of this. Hilda glared at Ben as if he were on trial. She knew he'd messed up. Ben huffed and looked into the fire, as much as it pained him to admit he had screwed up so much even Lucas had mocking rights. The reality was he hadn't trusted them, thought he could be the hero, like Martius. Taking that risk had put them all in jeopardy, and he hadn't taken that into account. For that, he was a fool, and for the sake of his crew, he had to make sure he never did it again. He wrangled with that angry ball of annoyance and frustration throbbing in his head. Giving to it would see him explode, would see them all walk away. So he took a deep breath and buried his pride. Fair enough. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. I promise I won't again. He looked them all in the eye. Even Dudley looked up from the ground. It was a foolish thing to do. It put you all in harm's way. I should have known better. If we're to succeed at this, we all have to work together, and I've learned that the hard way today. He was met with silence. It dragged on longer than he liked. Make sure you do learn from this, Benzan. Do not be a fool like Martius and ignore the world. You're better than him, despite you being more of a fuck-up, Hilda said, her face breaking into a smile. We're still alive. All we can do is focus on the next job. And what is the next job? Dudley asked. There ain't no way I'm going back to Pancho's hold. They'll be partying for a week in honor of Martius, Ben said. Agreed, Dudley said. It makes sense to avoid that prick for a while, especially now he has a mage, Hilda said. Where the hell did he find him, by the way? That's what I was wondering, Dudley said. I thought all the mages and witches were dead, Lucas said. Where he found him isn't the problem, Ben said. The thing I'm worried about is how we stop magic like that. Is it even possible? He killed that drake as if it were swatting a horsefly. If Martius is using magic to kill monsters now, how do we compete? How do we defend ourselves? We can't, Hilda said, which makes me inclined to agree with you. We need to head far away from Martius. So where do you think he'll go next? Ben asked them. They all chewed it over. This time last year he took us to the swamplands in the south. Remember, for the globber breeding season, Hilda said. Good money clearing out them globbers, Ben said. Piss easy work too. Not even Lucas can screw those traps up, granted, but if we know where Martius is, we can work elsewhere in peace, even if it means we're down a few coins, Hilda said. Ben nodded. I can live with that. After the stress of the last day, he could do with a job that only involved worrying about monsters, and not Martius too. So head where then? Hilda's gaze drifted off into the distance as she often did. Do you remember a few years ago when we went to that creepy village beside the river Yarrow? You know the one. They had those stickmen hanging from the willow trees. Dudley got tangled up in one. I do now you mention it, Ben said, smiling at the memory of an entangled dud flapping about. That was a weird place. Wasn't it a werewolf we were looking for? Dudley asked. Martius lost heart after a couple of days, remember? Hilda said. The night hunt? I didn't go on it, Ben said. Were you there? Hilda shook her head. I went, Lucas said. He sat forward, looking into the fire. We was moving through the woods with torches and crossbows. I had my big net at the ready, and then we hears this howl that sent every hair on my body upright. It started like a wolf's, but changed into something deeper and more wild. Next thing I know, Peepers screams and gets dragged off into the trees. Then Pan went down, and Mole after that. Martius saw his ass, and we all ended up running back to town. I'll be honest, I ain't never been so scared in all my life. We all slept with our swords in our hands that night. I remember Martius coming back into the inn, whiter than a powdered courtesan, Dudley said. So you're saying you want to take us back there, Hild? Ben asked. I ain't hunting no werewolf, Lucas was quick to add. I'm not saying we go back there, but around there are all kinds of beasts up that way. Goblins, wargs, spindrids, oxifars. There's bound to be a bounty or two. If no one's got any better suggestions, we can check it out and see what it has to say, Ben said. And since we're talking about Martius, what do you think the odds are of him keeping an eye on us? What do you mean? Lucas said, frowning. Maybe I'm being paranoid, but if I know that sly bastard, he'd have left someone here either to watch and follow us or to do something worse, Ben said. You don't think they're all in the tavern doing shots out of drake fangs? Dudley said. For once, I have to agree with Ben, Hilda said. It's just his game to try something like that. I can do the graveyard shift. One of you will probably fall asleep, and then we will all be dead, Hilda said. In the morning, we'll do a sweep of the area and see if we can find anything, Ben said. The last thing we want is him showing up again. It was a sobering thought, as the silence attested to. Don't you worry, Hild. I'll take the first watch, he said. The three of them were beat up and could do with the rest, and he had to admit he wanted some time alone. Outside, the air was cool, the rain clouds having shifted to open up the sky to the stars. The waterfall persisted with its rushing current. Off in the gloom, on the far bank, he could hear the wet, crunching sound of an animal tearing into the drake's decomposing body. He heard a branch snap, and his hand went to the hilt of his sword. He strained his ears for any other sounds, any hint at all that someone could be out there, watching him. For a long while he listened and heard nothing. He retreated to the mouth of the cave and sat down in the shadows, wrapping his cloak about him to keep warm. It had been one of the worst days of his life. He'd nearly died, nearly caused his crew's deaths, and all for naught. He thought it'd be easier than this. He'd spent half his life hunting monsters. He'd watched that oaf Martius lead the crew to glory, learned everything from him, but that approach wasn't working here. Martius was an alpha, loud, brash, and bold. He thought of no one but himself, cared little for others unless that consideration benefited him. Some men respected that. They all admired him at least, wanted to be like him, fought for his approval. Ben couldn't say any of his crew, bar Dudley, would fight for his respect and approval. Trying to be the tough, brave leader today had cost him that, if anything. No, if he were to do this and succeed, he had to put the crew first. He couldn't treat them like Martius had. They were fighting for each other's lives at the end of the day. They all needed to have each other's backs, and for that, he had to show that he cared about them, that he trusted them with his life, that he'd stand up for and protect them. It was what Martius had shown him at first: care, compassion, telling him that he'd done well, clapping those big hands of his on his back, giving him that approving wink and smile. It had all meant a lot to Ben at the time, and he'd spent much of his life chasing that approval. Ben resolved to do better. There would be more bounties, easier ones. They would start earning and making their way. And if they didn't, he wasn't quite sure what he'd do. That wasn't something he could think about now, though. Doubt crept closest in the silence, and he pushed it away. Instead, he thought of the future, of his crew, and the unknowns to come. If you enjoyed The Drake, then dive into Part 2, Trouble with Goblins, by heading to Patreon today and searching for Richie Billing. Thank you for listening.